will lower their shoulder and pound you into the ground, you have to learn to wrap up. Specifically, Levi Wallace, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White. You can't expect to lead with your shoulder and arm tackle and bring them.
When you have great coaches, then after you have great coaches, you get great players. You have a great organization, and you tell them one thing: just win, baby.
Getting to Allen, sending a wide left. He has to reverse his field, but he gets away from Allen. Comes back into the middle, 30, outside 40,
Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Black Tuesday podcast. We're just going to jump in it. We have a guest calling in about 15 minutes, so I got a couple quick points. I'm going to bring Obee in. I'm your host, Terrance Biggs. The Raiders dropped yet another one, 42-21 to the Tennessee Titans. The defense is awful. If I don't see Tahir Whitehead or Darrell Worley suit up in the silver and black again, I won't be sad. They're the ones who do the most talking, but yet get absolutely vaporized in pass coverage. If you have a safety / corner in pass coverage, you shouldn't be having that man on your team. If you have a linebacker who spends more time on his Twitter game than his coverage game, he's got to go. It was a bad signing. It never worked. But I want to talk about the quarterback. So today we tweeted out a draft profile that I wrote, and it was about Oklahoma QB Jalen Hurts. And you would have thought that I tweeted out the most vile, obscenity-filled rant ever, which it really wasn't. There was no obscenities. It's just a strict draft profile. You had car stands coming at me in every direction, and my thing is this: we all want Derek Carr to succeed, but we don't want Derek Carr's fans to succeed because, honestly, bro, I'm tired. These people are idiots. Just dumb. I saw somebody compare Derek Carr to Drew Brees when he left San Diego. Actually, it was trading Drew Brees from San Diego, which never happened. San Diego let Drew Brees walk. He failed the Miami physical and ended up in New Orleans. So if you're going to be a jackass with facts. Just the onslaught of the litany of just Carr defense stupidity. He's in year 6. This is pretty much what he's going to be like for the duration of his career. This ain't it. And you got a running back in Josh Jacobs. You have a tight end in Darren Waller. You have building blocks. You have draft picks and a boatload of money. The cap went up today. So they have money to spend. And it's tiring. I'm tired. I'm tired of Derek Carr as the quarterback of the Oakland, soon-to-be Las Vegas Raiders. It's tiring. I've seen enough. He has all of the physical capability in the world. Physical is never his problem. It's between the ears that always suffers. He has the ability to be Ryan Tannehill, and Ryan Tannehill is out here balling because he doesn't give a damn about being nice or being like telling the press after a loss, it's on me. No, he goes out there, he makes throws, he takes chances downfield, he makes chances with his legs. It's tiring. I'm sick of Derek Carr. All that said, let me bring in my co-host. He is the greatest alum of Morgan State University. He pretty much put the school on the map. He made them relevant. He is a go-go expert. I kid about Morgan State. It is a fine institution that is better than Coppin. I'm just saying. But it is the best HBCU in the state of Maryland. Let's just call it what it is, and probably Virginia too. Looking at you, Virginia Union. Get your shit straight. But my man Maliik Obee. Obee, what's going on?
What's up, Steve? I just want to piggyback off of what you were saying about Derek Carr. Now, what people need to understand is, we briefly talked about this last week, but this is a statement that people need to understand. When you say Derek Carr is in year 6, we're not talking about the fact that Derek Carr is in year 6 as a quarterback. We're talking about the fact that Derek Carr is in year 6, and we've seen peak Derek Carr. We've seen Derek Carr almost at MVP level status. And to regress is the fact that that's what we're talking about. We saw Derek Carr hit his stride in his 3rd year, and 3 years later, after the injury and everything, it seems like we haven't seen him progress. We've seen him get back to playing football and being a mid-level quarterback, but we have not seen him progress to the point where he can be considered a top 10 quarterback or someone that position is not at stake at all. I mean, let's be real here. I mean, we just had another quarterback declare in Jordan Love, and I'm not 100% confident that Gruden completely says, hey, I'm good. I don't need to draft a quarterback. I don't need to sign a quarterback. You got guys like Teddy Bridgewater in free agency. Like I said, you got possible quarterbacks that can fall to the Raiders like Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, who we just dropped a story on T wrote about Jalen Hurts today. There's a lot of quarterbacks that can fall to the Raiders. I'm not 100% certain Gruden's saying in his mind, oh no, I'm good with Derek Carr, who happens to live in my neighborhood. So, I'm good with my quarterback. I've never felt like that there was 100% confidence in Derek Carr through a Gruden statement. I mean, if you heard that, let me know, point me to the quote, whatever, where you said, damn, this is his guy. I mean, we saw Gruden go out on a limb for Antonio Brown, and he didn't even play it down. So, that potential, I get it. The idea of him just making this Raiders offense so dominant. But with that being said, I've never seen or felt 100% confident in Gruden having Carr. We know the theories about Gruden. He likes the quarterbacks that he likes and everything. And, the conspiracies have been there since he came in the door. So at this moment, Derek Carr hasn't done anything to really say, okay, this is not going to happen. I mean, people don't want it to happen. Not wanting it to happen and not happening is a difference. So with that being said, I just feel like that Derek Carr is having a decent season. He's not having an elite season in any way, shape, or form. He's having a decent season, but I wouldn't say that it would sway me enough to say that his job is 100% safe. That's the point that I'm at. I think that Derek Carr really, I'm not 100% certain that he can just flat out put his job in security at the highest level in any way these next few games.
Plus, you have to think about it. Throughout John Gruden's tenure, he's never had a young quarterback that he developed fully. He had Chris Sims, but let's just be honest. Chris Sims is better about talking about football than he is about playing it. He's never had that blue chip quarterback prospect that he took from the draft class into something. He has always surrounded himself around veterans. And it's funny when by the time John Gruden got to Green Bay, you saw the young Favre, you saw a couple of years in the league and a couple of development. You would think that Gruden would want that for himself. Like he wants that because if you think about it, Brett Favre and Mike Holmgren are linked. Every great coach has a great quarterback. Every offensive-minded head coach has a great quarterback. You have Don Coryell has Dan Fouts. You have Mike Martz and Mark Bulger or Kurt Warner. You have those guys. You have that. You have Sean Payton and Drew Brees. Everyone who calls himself a defensive mind, an offensive mind, has that signature player, that quarterback that they tie their legacy to. John Gruden is empty in that category, and he's got to realize going into year 3, our guy Ray had made the point if the Raiders do draft someone, they might let him sit a year and then take over Carr in 2021, which would use Carr as a gap or a bridge, which would be smart. Gruden has to like. I always found it ironic that someone who hosted a quarterback camp with all these rookie quarterbacks or soon-to-be rookie quarterbacks could never develop one.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
John Gruden's about what 56, 57. He looks
Yep.
at the balance of his life as his legacy. Does he want his legacy to win with somebody else's players, or does he want his legacy to be with he rebuilt a franchise with his own talent? He got rid of an edge rusher, which is a generational player. He got rid of a above average wide receiver. What's to
Mm-hmm.
stop him from trying to get rid of a quarterback that Derek Carr has? He has amazing arm talent. Like we said, it's not his. It's not the physical. He's not a John Gruden guy. You can tell that because John Gruden wants somebody to fight back. He wants that Rich Gannon to tell him how he is, where Carr will sit there and say, "Well, it's on me." No one wants to have to go through that, and people will sit there and say, "Well, you know, we haven't seen the angry Carr."
Mm.
At this point, do we care? Like, the Raiders are out of the playoffs. Do we care what angry Carr looks like? No. We, I mean, they
Oh,
let.
boy.
I mean, man, listen. There were how many clips or how many pictures of Derek Carr with wide open green couldn't get to the end zone or
Can we talk
throwing.
about
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I just got to chime in on this. Can we talk about yesterday? Using Wentz as an example of all of the things. Let's say Wentz or Eli of the example of all of the things that we've seen as excuses for Derek Carr. Like, I mean, Wentz didn't have wide receivers. We literally saw them line up two wide receivers because of injuries. Two. They only had three suit up. Okay, he didn't have wide receivers. His defense was doo doo. I mean, you got Ronald Darby getting torched by Eli Manning and a rookie Darius Slayton. Okay, so let's talk about it. I mean, all of the excuses that we hear about why Carr can't succeed. Wentz just went out there and did it. You give Eli Manning, who's supposed to be washed, all this unproven talent. You know what I'm saying? He's got a running back that, what I'm saying, they basically getting shut out. And it's like, all of that said, it's like, man, come on with the bullshit. I mean, it's other quarterbacks out here disproving what you're saying. Okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick, one of the most inconsistent quarterbacks ever. You got Ryan Fitzpatrick out here. The Dolphins have put up a fight in damn near every game this season. Nobody can name the two starting receivers for the Dolphins. The Dolphins' O-line is not there 100% yet. Their defense sucks. They traded away their best players. I mean, debatably. Besides Xavier Howard, Akeem Talib doesn't really count, but he's been hurt. So it's like, come on, look across the league. Ryan Tannehill, like, come on, come on. This is no. There's nothing that you could say that shows that Derek Carr is not between 15 and 20 for quarterbacks. He's a mid-tier quarterback, and he's not done anything remarkable to put his job in place. And there's still some type of security to say, wow, this guy is special. He's the records don't mean nothing. The Raiders have had bad quarterbacks for forever. The records really don't mean anything. When you look at the win-loss, I mean, like, come on.
It's tough to sit there and watch. Like, you're pretty much kind of sort of trying to waste Josh Jacobs' rookie season where the shelf life for a running back is short. And this is a team that sat at 6-4 and could have went into Kansas City and actually sent the Chiefs a message. They sent them a message, all right. Same stuff, different day. It didn't change. The song remains the same. To quote Led Zeppelin, it never changed, and it's troublesome and it's tiresome that this is the best version of Derek Carr. Like, their receivers open, and it never happened. But we will put a pin in that, Obie. We need to welcome our guest tonight. She is writer, professor, historian, one of the funniest people on Twitter, one of the smartest people on Twitter, Julia Hudson. Julia, good evening. How are you tonight?
Welcome, Julia.
I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I am good. I'm trying not to freeze out here in Wisconsin.
It's not so cold here just yet, but I can see it coming.
Oh yes, it's
definitely
happening.
on its way.
I woke up this morning. It was 4 degrees.
Oh, and see, it's a warm snap, so I think it was 47 this morning, which, in Pittsburgh, somebody's wearing shorts.
That's true. Here in Wisconsin, if you, I've seen it in the middle of winter when it gets that 38-degree day, you will see somebody with pasty legs outside wearing shorts and like boots, shorts, and a parka. I've seen it.
Every time. I don't understand the appeal of this concoction. It's definitely a Pennsylvania thing too. My daughter goes to school with kids who never wear pants. They just shorts all year round, and I just don't get it. I don't hate the cold, but I don't like it that much.
It's funny because like my daughter, when I walk to the bus stop, she'll sit there and she is fussy about her hair, and she's the kind of person, she doesn't like hats because a hat messes up her hair. And she grabbed a hat quick this morning, and she just looked at me. I'm like, are you cold? She nodded. She didn't care if it touched her hair. She just wanted that hat on top of her head. Now, we wanted to.
There comes a time where even though that, you have to give up on the hair.
Yes, and because she's like 5 years old, and she looks at that mirror, like making sure that every curl's in place. God help us all. Now,
You can rock a good hair and hat look.
See, I'm trying to convince her. We wanted to bring you on because you as a writer and as someone who has a firm grasp of a myriad of topics, I wanted to first talk about how the media shapes certain narratives. I'm going to give you 3 people who, over the last, let's say, 5 years, have come to the spotlight, all women, but yet the media has shaped their narrative where the average person who may not pay attention or do their own research will tend to go with that narrative. Hillary Clinton is one.
Oh, okay.
Hillary, her narrative, because she is well educated, super smart, had a multiple jobs, was a lawyer, actually is a lawyer. She was assertive, but yet she got painted to be angry and, pardon my French, but we swear a little bit here. Assertive and kind of was
for it.
Called, people called her a bitch because she didn't back down. When you look at Hillary, Julia, where do you think that narrative came from, and how did it manage to unfairly paint her?
So I think with Hillary Clinton, and I have to say that I have a certain amount of bias, being there for the beginning of her national spotlight, being a young woman in college, and at the time wanting to be an attorney as well, and watching how she goes from sort of beloved to despised to pitied to despised again to beloved. It's been such a roller coaster with her. But as soon as she started running for president again, and she got a little of it in 2008, but I think Barack Obama was such a strong personality in a lot of respects that the media almost ignored her after a little bit. So I'm really speaking about the 2016 election, which was a painful election in a lot of ways. And she could not win for losing in the sense that, if she was trying to be funny and genuine, then she was being fake. And if she was trying to show that she was going to be tough on whoever it was that she was asked to be tough upon, then she was bitchy. And if she tried to be vulnerable, then she was soft. There was no right answer for Hillary Clinton in terms of her media narrative. When in fact, She was all of those things. She was very tough. She can be bitchy because we all can. She can be vulnerable, but none of those things were good enough for her to get any sort of favorable coverage, I think. And it was, as a woman watching that and as a mother of a daughter watching that, it was very frustrating because she had to play things so very, very carefully. And then her opponent on the Republican side could literally say anything and act in any way, in any sort of unhinged fashion. And it was a media circus, and it got constant attention. And so I think the media shaped that narrative in such a disjointed way because there was never the same kind of criticism for Trump in the way that Clinton, I think, was really focused on. Some of that, I think, of course, has to do with the fact that there was a certain assumption that she was going to win, but a lot of it had to do with her gender and who she was. But as we're seeing in this election, any woman, just not that woman, the not that woman list is getting kind of long.
That's where it seems now. I mean, just from my own, quick viewpoint, I see where she had a dizzy spell and people were questioning her fitness for office, but yet Bernie's out here having a full-on heart attack and people are saying, well, he's a warrior, he's tough, and he had a heart attack. That means his shit stopped working for a while. I mean, it. Oh, I can't.
She had pneumonia.
Yeah, he had pneumonia. This dude was going towards a light and no. Obee, the next one I want to talk about is a recent one. She's been on she's not been on the show, but we talked about her. She was at a basketball game on Sunday night, and apparently she called an uproar because she wasn't wearing pants.
Oh God.
And Lizzo. Now, here's the thing. My thing is this, where the media, some parts of the media has shaped her narrative is the fact that she can pretty much say or do what she wants, but even if you critique the fact that she should have wore pants, some of the media will jump on you saying how, well, would you say that to Beyonce? Yes, yeah. Put on some pants. What do you think
and
that?
I think we can make a blanket statement that everybody should wear pants.
Yeah.
Or shirt, coverage.
Coverage. Obee, when you see her narrative, Obee, as far as how it goes, how do you think the media narrative around her and her approach to how she is as far as her personality, how do you think that shapes it for her, Obee?
I mean, the thing is that, like I said before, I feel like she's an industry plant. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like there are few artists that have this type of immunity, and she's a PC artist. With that being said, it's like she's trying to appeal to everybody. She speaks for, let me say this. I have a problem with people acting like that in terms of music or entertainment period that we have some issue with fat women, because I can name plenty of overweight women that are successful, that are loved. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, with that being said, it's like, come on. Like, don't make it seem like, oh, it's because she's fat. Well, first of all, plenty of celebrities and musicians, etc., have been big, have done controversial things, said controversial things, and it's like, come on, like, with that being said, it's like, with her, it's just like, that whole thing was like, come on, you got kids out there, you got older people out there, you got people out there that respect themselves. Like, why are you doing that? And that's the difference. That's what I'm saying. All these people putting all these, situations, medicals out there about stuff that doesn't equal. If Beyonce took a photo shoot tomorrow naked, it does not equate to that. That's the difference. Is that's a photo shoot. If Beyonce did anything like that, there would be the NSFW. It would be blurred out. You would have to go above and beyond to see it. It wouldn't be just open and available for kids. You know, so with that being said, it's like, come on. We are talking about a public basketball game. If you did that at a high school basketball game, big, skinny, tall, fat, whatever, you would be charged with indecent exposure. You cannot
And
do
that's
stuff like that on the school grounds or places where children are present. So don't make an excuse for this woman just because she's a celebrity. And that's what I'm saying. She has immunity because she went and I mean, Bossip has said something about her, and you know, made a funny headline about her. And Bossip does this for everybody, any and everybody, whatever the controversy or situation is. I've never seen Bossip apologize for an offensive headline before this woman. Who is behind her? Like, what is, you know, she's Teflon. Like, come on. Like, but then it's
Well,
like,
we'll wait and
you
see as she. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
no, I'm saying, like, you know, she's like, because I know, like, it was, I think it was last year or something like that when she had the big performance, and I was just like, oh, I didn't really know who she was. And then, you know, she just like, I mean, it was just like, I mean, she's a mega star, you know, and it's like, and then she's on Atlantic Records and all that stuff. But it's just like, come on, it's that you know, there has not been, if it is, you can point it out to me, an event where another woman did something on that to that magnitude on a stage. So it's no other comparable hypothetical situation. It's wrong, in my
I'm
opinion.
thinking.
Now, for me, it's like I'll let Julia jump in here real quick, but this my quickest point is this: it's like somebody told me like, well, if she were a size 2, would you have the same problem? Yeah, like I don't really. If I'm gonna go to a ball game, I don't really want to see somebody with like straight up like a ripped shirt and a thong. Like just on a comfort level, how is that comfortable? Just I know that's not really pertinent to the point, but how is that comfortable to sit on a chair with not pants on? Like just and somebody also asked me like, well, you know, is it would I do it? First of all, no one wants to see me that way. I was strict for the blind before I would. Nobody needs that. But Julia, what is your take on the issue with Lizzo as far as this with the no
Whether
pants?
or not it's a. So I'll come at this from a couple of directions. And first, I would not personally be comfortable in that. But she also, I looked at the outfit, and I recognize as a former dance teacher about 3 layers of dance quality, like professional dance quality, protective wear. So she had on at least one pair of dance tights and a pair of fishnets, in addition to the actual costume, which were flesh toned. So I think a little difficult to pick up on if you don't have that costume. But it didn't offend me any more than risque cheerleader costumes. I always have to sit and have a conversation with my daughter about that. And so, you know, for me, was it outlandish? Yes, absolutely. It was meant to be. She was trying to make a statement. Is it that different than Prince wearing assless pants? I don't know. That looks better than Howard Stern wearing assless pants, so maybe I'm just as biased. So, you know, did I think it got made into too big a deal? Probably a little bit. And I didn't see as much coverage on that. In my defense, it's finals week here. I read 2 or 3 articles about, you know, how can that be comfortable? She's sitting on a seat. I always wonder that about short shorts in public buses for the same reason. And, you know, I think it was as much the outrage that it garnered. That, you know, oh my gosh, look at her. She is out there. And, you know, I like Lizzo. A lot of things. She's extraordinarily talented. And I do think that we have had a number of normal-sized and overweight stars. Absolutely. I completely agree with your point. But there's never been the same kind of sex symbol that Lizzo is trying to craft herself as an adult woman who's very comfortable with her own sexuality. The physicality of a performer tends to be an aside when you look at the more traditionally sized I don't like any of these vocabulary words. I don't like any of this terminology. As a woman who is a little bit bigger, but at the same time, we do have body norms that we look at. And so, while we were talking, I Googled cheerleader costumes, and they're incredibly skimpy. Even high school cheerleader costumes. NFL cheerleader costumes are absolutely very skimpy. Is it different than wearing booty shorts or what the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders wear? I don't know that it is. If nothing else, at least she probably makes more money than NFL professional cheerleaders do. So, for me, I want to see what she does with her persona as she becomes a more well-established star. You saw Beyonce do this, where, a lot of her earlier stuff was nowhere near as edgy as Lemonade was. And so I want to see Lizzo really come into her own before I decide, who is this music really for, and is it for her as much as it's for anything else? And, I think what's a bummer for me is that this is the most I've gotten to talk about Lizzo, and it's entirely been about her wardrobe. And the only other person that I can think of that's garnered this much attention was Janet at the Super Bowl. And, she was blackballed in a lot of ways for, what they cast as a wardrobe malfunction. And so she got horrendously punished
I think
in a way
that
that I
actually,
would do something like that in 2019.
I think
It's a different era now.
I think it hurt Janet's career because it's funny because I remember that game. It was the Panthers and Patriots, and this was the last Super Bowl I actually went, the party I went to when I lived back east, and we're all sitting there trying to watch it. And we're like, did that just happen? And people blamed her, but it was Justin Timberlake who actually it was his action. Yes, it was supposed to, but it was his action. If he didn't do it, there's no chance that she might have. Well, there's very little chance.
No, absolutely
and
not.
she paid
was not
for
in control of that situation at all. And
she paid severely. And I don't think that her
ridiculous juxtaposition.
I don't think that her career recovered. I mean, yes, it's always been great, but I don't think it recovered the same. But Julia, another person I want to talk about as far as the shaping of the media narrative is Kamala Harris. We spoke last week about her dropping out of the race, and I'm still a little bit, I'll be honest, salty because of how it went down.
So salty. So salty.
When you look at how the media wrote a eulogy for her campaign shortly after she just announced her candidacy last year, and they kept doing it throughout this process, to observer, it kind of looks like they were not trying to root for it, but they were trying to shape a narrative. And some voters will actually read this and kind of, I'm not saying they'll change their minds, but there are some folks who believe everything they read. Do you think that
or
the
didn't
media
even know
helped?
she was running?
Exactly. Do you think the media helped to change some of the perception for the worse?
I think that they definitely held a shovel for that campaign. I will be an out and proud Kamala Harris fan. I have been for a couple of years now. I was definitely concerned when I initially read about concerns over her support of mass incarceration, and then I did a little research, which, by the way, was totally free and available to everybody via Google. And, incarceration rates went down for minor crimes. And the debate over her policies with regard to truancy never resulted in actual arrests or anything like this. So much of that was overblown and got played up in the media with no counter, with no discussion. It was a quote, and then we're going to move on. And then when you see it compared to the feigned media enthusiasm over somebody like Pete Buttigieg, who has won 2 mayoral elections, one with far less of a share of the vote than the other. And so in talking to people about Senator Harris's campaign, people like my father who had heard that she was pro-capital punishment. And I sat him down and I said, this is her webpage. She has been consistently anti-capital punishment. Well, that's not what he had heard, and he was surprised to hear it the other way around. I think the media absolutely shaped that narrative. And in an era where money is making all the difference, for then billionaires to just be able to buy their way in to races and debates without any sort of real vetting is, I think, it's a tragedy for the Democratic Party, and I think we're going to lose next year. I really think we're going to lose. I think she could have really rallied people around her, and I think she's strong enough to deal with the attacks that Trump throws at her, and I have real concerns about Elizabeth Warren's ability to do that, and Bernie Sanders' ability to do that, for example. And so I think the media owe her a huge apology and some real discussion, and she didn't get it. I am really angry.
I'm still a little bit salty. Obee, I know we talked last week about how you, after a while, you kind of, you did your own research and you looked into her policies and it changed your perception. Do you think that others who didn't look as deeply were affected by what they read?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Can you repeat that one more time?
You said last week how you looked deeply into her policies, and then you were, do you think that others who may not have looked as deeply as you did were affected by what they read?
I think that's a good question. A lot of times, I think nowadays, people take things and run with it when somebody says it. And you know what's crazy is that we just saw a guy on Twitter basically say, I made up a rumor that Lizzo was, messing with, what's my guy's name on the Lakers? I can't think of his name. I think he's in his second year. The guy on the Lakers. And the dude just made it up on Twitter, and then it got to all of these journalistic websites. They're basically claiming sources, but nobody said these are my actual sources as in a person. And with that being said, it's like stuff just spreads. I mean, how many people, if you go into urban America right now, and you ask 100 people, did Michael Jordan really invest in private prisons? There's a great chance that 95% will say yes, and not knowing that the Michael Jordan is a completely different person than the basketball player. I mean, with things like this is that I feel like people are going to take stuff and run with it because, if it goes viral or something like that, that's all it takes these days. And then people won't do their own research, so like with something like this, I mean, like I said, it was something that I first heard from somebody else. I kind of ran with it for a minute, and I said, let me step back and look at, people aren't just supporting her because she went to Howard or something like that. When you look at politics, especially as a person of color, you got to say, okay, yes, I know this person is black, but what else? I've never felt that there was a candidate that did or did have the freedom to do for black people what black people want done for them in terms of a political candidate. And when I say that, I mean as in, there are a lot of, I won't just say black people, a lot of people of color feel like, okay, they get the perfect candidate and things are going to change. They're going to all have good jobs and all of this other stuff, and racism is going to be resolved and all this other stuff. I say that to say, I mean, it's like you get somebody that gets, I mean, like, I think, like you guys said, Kamala Harris was the best opportunity we had to get Trump out of the White House. There is no Democratic candidate that has enough push and momentum besides her to even compete, to even be taken serious when it's time to go to the debates and everything. There isn't one. So with that said, it's like, I mean, now it's just like, we kind of got to get prepared for what's coming. Another 4 years of this. And the crazy thing is, I just want to say this on this note, is that a lot of people feel like Trump exposed racism. No, he just allowed a lot more people to feel comfortable So with all of that being said, all of these things that's going on out here, it was just Trump. It was just Trump and his policies, and people saying, you know what, we got the person in office that knows us, that cares about us, that allows us to be the people that we are. So, all of the people that wanted to pretend like the world just became racist or that racism should be over or prejudice, homophobia, all of these things, the guy that's really pushing a lot of this stuff is going to be in office for a while, and I think that's something that we need to be realistic about. Even with the whole thing when he was mimicking mimicking the mentally ill person, what I'm saying, and the handicapped people and all this stuff. This is not the term politically correct has to especially apply to the president. I mean, the head of politics, and it doesn't. When you really think about that, that's crazy to think about. That our president is probably the least politically correct person and most tone-deaf person in the country. Like,
For me,
really think about that. That's crazy.
It is. Julia?
It's almost mind-boggling how much he's been able to get away with. And it really, and I think, Obee, you're absolutely right, it really highlights the existence of these attitudes in the United States, which most people, people of color were already aware of. Many women were already aware of. LGBTQ people were already aware of. I mean, none of this is a surprise, except to people who would love to believe this fantasy that with the election of Barack Obama in 2008, poof, everything got fixed. And, I've thought since 2016 that, the people who voted for Donald Trump either were blatant racists or for them it wasn't a deal breaker, which is just as bad. His overt racism and his absolute disregard for human life was on display from the minute he came down that escalator, and it was a cornerstone of his campaign. It just always has been, and now we have to figure out how we're going to navigate the next 4 years and protect as many vulnerable people as we can, and it's incredibly disheartening. I'm sorry, I have a kitten trying to play with the cord on my phone.
But I want to, jump more into this issue with the voting because, like I mentioned in the introduction, Julie is one of the people who thoughtful in her approach, and she is a feminist, but she's not the archetypal what we have, seen a lot on social media as far as being a social media feminist, where there's that lack of cognizance about the plight of Black women, the plight of Latina women, the plight of Asian women, where she has think about how to phrase it. Even though you are a feminist, you don't want to see the manager. You're not trying to make everyone or trying to be everyone's ally. You're just trying to be an actual human being. Why do you think that there's a disconnect between certain white feminists and persons of color as far as the voting process, privilege, and rights?
So I'll start by answering that what that has taken for me, and I like to think that this is a process that's never really going to be done, is being able to listen and understand that my experience is going to be very different from somebody else's experience, and that under no circumstances can I speak for women of color. Under no circumstances can I speak authoritatively from the perspective of somebody in the LGBTQ community. So what I like to think of as my role is somebody that just says, okay, what is your experience, and then how does that change my relationship to feminism? And so that's been my starting point. It took me a while to get there. I'm sure that, if you talked to me in 1994, I probably sounded like a lot of these social media feminists. The difference was that I was 19, not 40. And, some of that I think is due to, to spending a certain amount of time as an assistant professor of women's gender and sexuality studies and trying to read as much by Black feminist authors as I could, trying to read as much about intersectional feminism as I could, and understand what that concept meant for understanding the struggle against various systems of oppression in the United States. and across the world. Again, my experience is within the United States, and I have to keep that in mind too. That the last thing I want to do is to walk into someplace else as a white colonizer. Like, this is what you need to do here too. And a lot of that, and having conversations with people, and saying, tell me what your perspective is, and that means students as well, having students come in my classroom, and trying to create a space that's very safe for them to say, you know what, my experience isn't like this woman's experience, and what does that mean? Feminism isn't just one set of principles. There are a couple of things I think most people that identify as feminists agree on, but I think to be truly effective as somebody that's working for the success for women across the world, you have to understand that these systems of oppression and law, that patriarchy and white supremacy, are deeply, deeply related. That heteronormativity is deeply related to these structures as well. And once you can kind of wrap your mind around that, the rest of it does sort of fall into place. But you always have to remain vigilant and to understand that that this struggle that you might be just entering is something that women have been that Black women have been dealing with for generations, that lesbian women have been dealing with for generations, that trans women have been dealing with for generations. And so coming in there and then trying to take over the conversation, which is I think what I tend to see on social media, is that you'll have somebody immediately come in with a hashtag, not all white women. Yeah, but when you did that, you really meant but me. And just reading and seeing, trying to say, okay, I know that this isn't me, but this is obviously this woman's experience, and what I need to do is listen to that and give that the attention that it deserves. And that by understanding that, if I hear another woman do it, then I need to stand up to that white woman and say, you really maybe need to listen to what other women have to say about that before you jump in and give your opinion. And so sometimes it's also self-policing, which is very, very difficult to do. It's hard to talk to your racist uncle at Thanksgiving and tell them that they're wrong, because your mom is looking at you and she might agree with you, but she doesn't want you to make waves at dinner. And these kinds of conversations, the fact that we don't have them, I think it's one of the reasons why we're here right now in 2019. And it's, we're reaching a boiling point where, now we need to talk to people about why it's wrong to put children in cages in New Mexico and why that's racist.
True.
And, for as much progress as we like to think that we've made, we really haven't made that much.
No, it has been it looks a lot different. Like I thought at this point it would be a little further along. Obee, I want to take the same question, but I kind of want to flip it, where I'm going to use Julia for an example. Open-minded person, not out here trying to be like everyone's ally, everybody's friend, just honest. Do you think that there is a portion of the Black community that is resistant to these conversations and dialogues because, one, they like the division, two, they don't really want to reach out because of the historical aspect of it, or three, that by keeping that distance, they can kind of keep some of the Hotep principles and concepts as their own? What I'm asking is basically, do you think that we should, some of the communities should be more open to truthful, honest, respectful dialogue?
Should? Yes. Will? I don't know. Now, the question with that is, when you was doing the numbers, I was going to point out that I was going to say 1 and 3, because of the fact that there are a lot of Black people that say, you know what, I have 40 years of evidence, 40 plus years of evidence that, my kind is not, welcomed, and, you might not have been taught racism because you're not born racist, you're taught to be racist. You might not have been taught to be racist, but I have, more than enough inclination to say that it's majority rules. And with that being said, there are a lot of black people that say, you know what, a lot of black people break it down like this. I can't judge everyone by the same measuring pot, because what if it's already done to me as a black person? Like, I'm not gonna think that you're racist because I already deal with, as a black person, deal with this. I'm not gonna assume just because you do it, because people already assume that I'm black, that I'm racist. I mean, that I steal or that I'm uneducated, or whatever the case may be. A lot of black people say, okay, I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt, so proving otherwise. So with that being said, it's like, I get it, and then there's some black people that just say, well, you got to look at it like this. I'll just be real with it, in terms of religion. There are a lot of black people whose forgiveness or understanding, etc., stems from religion. We know that the importance of religion in terms of slaves and feeling like it was the gateway to helping them get to, where they wanted to be and everything, and freedom and just some type of hope, So with that being said, it's like, we know that. And then now we've gotten to the point where Christianity is so dominant in this part of the world that we have seen, Islam skewed and, misconstrued and everything and painted as a violent religion, when in reality, the Christians that, were in the army and et cetera, that bombed on these countries with innocent victims is really no different. Now, with that being said, I think that a lot of time we've seen more than enough evidence that many black people that are, devout Christians believe that they are going to get retribution for what's been done to them or will be done to them in the afterlife. And that's the satisfaction that they get, and it helps them to sleep well when things are done to them. We look at Twitter, for instance. Every day we see it. Twitter, do your thing. This racist white person cursed me out, called me a nigger, slapped me in the face, spit in my face, or something crazy like that. Twitter, do your thing. Save me. I didn't do anything when it happened. Maybe you can, you know the trend. I
Brother
found this
Nature.
person's address. Here's their address. I found it through their IP address. It amazes me when people are like that. Like they're like CIA agents or something. But with that being said, that to my point, it's like Twitter, do your thing. That's a lot of black people. Dylan. No, let me give you an example. What's Botham Jean? We talked about this. His brother and father and all them talking about, I forgive. How the hell you forgive somebody that ain't, asking forgiveness? But anyway, they felt like, okay, God got it. God's going to take care of it. And then you have different, the Rastafarians believing in Jah and, all of this stuff. Everybody has their own beliefs, you know what I'm saying? So it's like that also plays a part in this.
I mean, for me, it's like short story. When I was a little boy, I went to school in the suburbs, but I lived in the city, and this little boy called me the N-word. I punched him in his nose. I was like 9, so like 1983. So I punched him right in his nose, and my father had to come out to school and get me. He's a trucker, so there's this giant like semi parked in front of my school parking lot. I'm like, oh no. So I'm sitting in the office, and I explain. And on the way home, he tells me how that's how it's going to be. I'm going to have to fight that way for the rest of my life. Just constantly having to like knuckle up and, for lack of a better term, beat people's ass. Now, same day, I'm at my grandmother's house. My grandmother was super religious, old school Southern. I explained to her what my father said, and she stopped what she was doing. She sat down. She turned her chair towards me and said, "Look, you can't fault everyone. If somebody comes to you with that aggression, that's different. But if somebody comes to you with an open mind, and yes, you will encounter people with open minds who are white, who are Puerto Rican, who are Asian, you need to understand that there are people who you encounter will have pure intentions. And honestly, for the last 36 years, I'm old. 36 years of my life, I I have taken that to I have taken that to heart because I sit there and I look at it. There are some people like we mentioned, hoteps are good for that. They'll sit there and tell you how they're Pan African and all black this and all black that, but you know when the Jordans made in the Philippines, driving that German BMW, dating a woman from Korea, it's just a whole bunch of everything that's not black. They don't practice
Right.
what they preach, and that annoys me to no end because it's like it's that I think that any kind of nationalism is bad. White nationalism, black nationalism. No, no. Like you can be strident and you can have a strong belief in your people, but to want to segregate yourselves in a country that is shouldn't be segregated is not really the move. You have 20 of these little kids around here who are gonna parrot what they see. I got a 5-year-old and I got a 3-year-old. There's no way in hell I'm gonna sit there and say, you know what? Plus they're half white anyway, so it's like not gonna sit there and say, no, no, you come over here now and you leave those people alone. No, that's not the way the world works. And it's a common sense thing, and it bothers me to no end. Julia, I want to talk about being a writer and being a woman. I'm sure you've had to deal with some of the bro culture as far as either people who read your work or people who are colleagues or people who are contemporaries. How do you maintain such balance when having to deal with jackasses?
Well, in some, excuse me, in some areas it's easier than others. The first thing I do is I don't read the comments because I can't not respond. And so I know that about myself. It's kind of like, you know what your own weaknesses are. And so there are things I don't keep Irish whiskey in my house because that just sounds like a good way to get in a fight. Like, I just don't dive into the comments. And so, I've got sort of two writing areas. I've got more popular stuff that I've done, and I've got the scholarly stuff that I've done. And I've honestly had a little bit more pushback from the scholarly stuff because of sort of male gatekeeping that you see within academic literature. And so that can be a little frustrating at times, even though it is supposed to be anonymous. The stuff that I write about is so very narrow that we kind of all know who each other is. Where I've seen it, honestly, is the classroom. And that is a very different set of relationships because it's also a power relationship, right? So I'm in a position of power. I'm also an educator. And so my responsibilities as an educator are different than, somebody that's going to write about, food or abortion for Huffington Post. And that's where I've had to, and what's great about that is that I tend to have time to make a more measured response, which is why I say on the comments. And I'm usually pretty good at sort of sussing out within the first couple of weeks where I'm going to get the most pushback. And I try and engage that student one-on-one, which is something you can't do on the internet, which I can't do on Twitter, for example. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And so you kind of have to be thick-skinned about it. And I think both of you have made this point, and not just tonight, that, the Twitter do your thing culture. There are people who just live to stir that shit, and I just can't. I don't have time. I have too much going on in my life, professionally and personally, to get into too many Twitter arguments. And I have done it. I'm not going to say that I've never posted up on a Twitter thread and gotten an argument with somebody. I absolutely have. And I have had ugly DMs that say things about how my favorite was when I had actually somebody call me a race traitor. I didn't know that still was a thing that people did. That was early in my Twitter days. That kind of threw me for a loop. or who brushed me off. I've had some weird messages, and I just block and move on. I just don't have time for it, and I don't have to. I don't have to engage with every single person that engages with me, which is how it is different than when I'm in the classroom, where I do have to engage with those students, and then, I feel like I can grade them fairly, but it does present some interesting situations in the classroom, because at the same time I want to make sure that people in my classroom who are marginalized feel safe. And sometimes that might mean shutting down a conversation that I think is going in an ugly direction. And so it's a very interesting set of boundaries to have to believe, to have different places where you have to talk and different voices at different times. So I do that with writing, but I think I actually have more freedom when I'm writing than I do when I'm teaching.
It's funny, Obee, like, to Julia's point about having the freedom to write, you and I cover sports, and we have to encounter, how do I say this nicely? I can't. Some of the dumbest people you'll ever see on the face of God's green earth are sports fans. I mean, goddamn, I can't. It is like, I literally now am at the point where if somebody asks me a question about things we write or things I write, I'll answer it. I'm not trying to get in. Once I say the agree to disagree, that means I'm done talking. I'm done, and I move on. But if there's further comment after the agree to disagree, I'm just gonna block, because I'm trying to be I'm just trying to go over here. Like, if there is meaningful dialogue about race, politics, whatever, via Twitter, I'm here for it. Like, I engage because so many people engage, but just like Julia said, as far as in her early days of Twitter, when I first jumped on Twitter, I was writing something about the draft, and I had my daughter was 4 months old. I had somebody come, like, say something I'll never repeat, and I said to this person, if I find you ... just draw your own conclusions. And IP address was found, but I was like, nope, just gonna let it be. The person not on Twitter anymore. I know this. Just the point is, like, people try it, and as far as being a sports writer, and as far as how do you deal with idiocy, Obee?
We've talked about this multiple times, and it's a struggle. It's a struggle. It's definitely a struggle, because sometimes people just, man, sometimes people just say something. It's like, I know you. It's not even that. It's not even an image I portray or anything. Like, just period. I just know you wouldn't even be. I got a gut feeling that you would not say something like that in real life. And with that being said, it's like, come on, like, it's like it makes your blood boil. Not because of the fact that, oh, they're not, they're close, that you can actually do something or something like that, but just the fact that it's like, come on, you feel that safe enough that you can say something that heinous? Because I feel like that it's been situations like that before, and then somebody that doesn't have, like, their identity out there. You know what I'm saying? It's like you got this invincibility cloak, where it's like, okay, you feel like I could just say or whatever, do whatever without any consequences, and that's crazy. I have to live with everything that I say or do. And some people don't live by those rules, or some people know that it's cowardice to do the things that they do, and they just do it anyway. It's like, come on.
Like, I'm big into I don't tweet anything that I wouldn't say to someone's face. Like, and I'm not sitting up trying to be like Billy Badass. No, I am honest, but I'm not gonna sit there and be wildly disrespectful unless it happens to me first. But my thing would be, I'm not gonna sit there and hide behind Twitter thumbs. Just like you said, my that's my picture. I don't have an A. I don't have a picture of a famous athlete. That's me, and that's the way it's gonna be. Now, one of the things I do want to hit on with Julia is this: being from you live in Pittsburgh. I think, according to the last census, that 26.1% of the population in Pittsburgh is black. Now, being in Western PA, they have a real reputation for conservatism and trying to lean right. How does that jive with such a large black population in the city of Pittsburgh?
So I think that there is, there's a real divide between city and suburb. There's a real divide between even different suburbs. And, one of the interesting things about Pittsburgh is that you are 25 minutes to a half an hour away from farm country in any direction that you go. And so when you look at something like the 2016 voting map, you see these huge islands of blue right in the city. And in we'll call them the inner ring of suburbs. And then it gets lighter blue, and then it gets pink into the outer ring of suburbs. And it's definitely a divided area. It's a divided city. And I'll preface this with, I've lived in a lot of places. I've lived in small town America. I've lived in the South. I've lived in the West. And I love Pittsburgh. And there are a lot of things about it that are really great. And there are opportunities to overcome the divisions in this city. You just have to take them. And you have to find ways to do that. So all that said, it's an incredibly segregated city. And it creates, I think it lends itself to tremendous tension. And not a little bit of distrust between the urban areas of Western Pennsylvania and the outskirts. That I think, because of the way our voting system is set up, have a little bit more political power than maybe they should. I lived in central Pennsylvania for 7 or 8 years, and I saw it firsthand, where you have areas that are 92 and 95% white. And these were people that were mobilized, some for the first time in 2016, by the racist messages coming out of the Trump campaign. And so that I think it creates, and I'm sure that you see the same thing in Eastern Pennsylvania. I just have the same kind of experiences there. But I know you see it in York County and places like that are openly racist. I would be driving through, parts of central Pennsylvania and seeing Confederate flags hanging up. And as somebody that grew up in the South, it just didn't make any kind of sense. This is a war you won. Why are you hanging this flag? And it's because it was a badge of racist hatred. It wasn't anything about heritage, the way they tried to cast it in the South. And so, I think that, in Western PA, I think we have a lot of work to do. And, it's going to have to be coming, I think a lot of it will have to come from the white community in Pittsburgh to make amends for the way that Black neighborhoods were decimated, to build things like hockey stadiums. And, the broken promises to the Black community that, that money that would come from the creation of the Penn Stadium hasn't been poured back into the community the way that they had promised. And there's starting to be a little bit of movement there, but I think it's interesting. There was just a couple of studies, and I can send you some links if you're interested, that talks about the degree of segregation in Pittsburgh and how it is a very, very difficult place to navigate in terms of racism. It's a very hard place to be a Black citizen in the city. Are there opportunities? Sure, but they are not evenly distributed in any way, shape, or form. And so I'll definitely, that was the Gender Equity Committee that put out a recent study about, in particular, being a Black woman in the city of Pittsburgh, and then 2 other racial equity studies that were recently done. And so we absolutely have a lot of work to do here.
Pittsburgh is one of those cities I have been there a few times, just going to a football game, just because being from Connecticut, it's a quick train ride to Philly. It's a long train ride from Philly to Pittsburgh, and you meet good people who, like, I've been in, Newcastle, Butler County, Aliquippa, and it is definitely different outside of the city. Like, even, what's that little town? Cranberry. I don't know why it sits in my mind, but you see some of the weirdest things in Cranberry Township, Pennsylvania, as far as
if I'm not mistaken, that's home of Troy Polamalu.
And it's like some of the weird looks, but I know that, we have touched on a bunch of serious, heavy topics. I know that we always end up with good food topics. Obee, I have a food question for you.
Oh,
What is Obie, what is the last new food that you tried that you weren't sure that you'd like, but you loved it?
Uh, oh man, that's a good one. Because I try stuff so often. I would have to say, hmm, um, I'd have to say, I always pronounce this wrong. Bibimbap, bibimbap.
Hmm.
It is, it's man. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you how good this stuff is. It's like it's a Korean food. It's rice and it's like they have this white sauce. White sauce, soy sauce, all these different sauces. It's a Korean dish with vegetables, fruits, meat, everything. And man, let me tell you, like when I say I thought it was something that I just looked at it like, what is this? I don't, I don't know what is this? And it's been something that's become a favorite for me.
I know I
Yeah,
tried
right. That sounds good.
um,
Yeah, it's really good.
Ethiopian food for the first time. Oh, couple weeks ago. It was much better than I thought. There's a Ethiopian spot in Milwaukee, and I know it's strange to have an Ethiopian restaurant in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but here we are. And it was warm. It was hot, and but it was good. And it was just a plate and just different vegetables and meat. It was solid, and I actually would go back. And it was funny because my son is 3, like I said, and he'll eat anything, and he
Mhm.
loved it. And he likes, he my kids are at the age where they'll try different stuff. Except my daughter will, unless it's like a steak or hamburger, she's not really here for it. Julia, what was the last new food you tried that you thought was really good?
So that I didn't think was going to be good and tried it and liked it. I had a student last spring that made olive cookies,
Oh
Oh,
and this
wow.
is not like a cookie with olive oil. It was almost like a shortbread with chunks of black olives in it.
oh,
And it was definitely I was iffy on it because those things don't seem like they match to me. And they were delicious for the first 2 or 3 days, but they don't keep well. I discovered. Everything that I've tried to do, I kind of expected to like because I'm this family. I try to do stuff a lot. But that was the one that sort of threw me off. I think was the olive cookie.
Wow.
an olive. Okay. Now we also like drinks. Obi, what is the one drink that everyone loves that you're like, nah, pass?
Uh, that's a good one. I would have to say, and this might sound crazy. I'm sorry, but Jameson. It's cool, but it's not that great to me.
Just the
It's
Jameson
a
taste?
really,
mass
really
market
popular.
Irish whiskey.
Yeah,
It's
I
it's
mean,
only okay.
uh, yeah,
Julia, which
just in my
which
I'm
opinion.
definitely
which drink you're like, nah, I know that folks like it, but I don't really love it.
um I can't do tequila of any kind.
Oh,
I it's it I I can't handle it. Yeah, and I'm definitely not young. I mean, I'm in my 40s. But the last time I drank straight tequila, I don't remember the next 40 minutes. Even though I had perfectly rational conversations with people around me and I ate food and all this stuff. So I'd have to say that's probably the one that I'm the leariest about. I could do like a margarita, but I can't just have tequila. And I have to say, and everybody, I see it on my timeline all the time, Jack Daniels. Uh,
fair.
I grew up in
Mm.
Kentucky. I'm sorry, they don't. It's That's Tennessee. I don't have anything to do with it. I don't like the Volunteers. I don't like Jack Daniels. I can't drink it.
For me, I agree with the Jack Daniels part because in my dumbass thought, I had a work. a work outing, and I was not thinking, and somebody ordered me a Jack Daniel's neat,
Oh no.
and I felt like I had to drink it because, well, it's a drink, and my government, I'm like, okay. After that second sip, I lost all will to finish that glass, but I had to just choke it down. It literally felt like somebody took a match and a blowtorch and shoved it in my mouth and turned it on. I was hot from the inside out. I was sweating
Yeah.
from my hair. Jack Daniels is not it. It
But
just, mm-mm.
no, it's not good. I also
Like,
don't really like IPAs, and a lot of people do, but I just can't.
I can't. It's too, like, give me, well, being in Wisconsin, we're known for beer, cheese, and brat. So there's like
Right.
every every town has its cheese houses, breweries, and brat factories, and it's folks here love IPA. I don't know. It's the feel of it. It just doesn't like I eat when I drink, so it just doesn't fit right with
It
food.
needs
It
to
just
taste
doesn't.
good.
It does. Now, speaking of food, what is your most controversial food take, Julia?
Oh my, a controversial food. Like I'm almost afraid. Um, I'm almost afraid to say I do like occasionally pineapple on pizza. I probably use more. Like this is probably the white ladyest thing I've ever said. I mean, I've probably put more mayonnaise on things than I should. I'll admit it. I'm not afraid, but it has to be real mayonnaise. Don't give me Miracle Whip. All right, I'm from Kentucky. All right, Hellman's or bust. But let's see. I mix ketchup and mustard together on fries.
Oh no, that's interesting.
Yeah, I do. It's like the mustard is too much. I just need a little ketchup in there to mellow it out a little bit.
I
could do one or the other as well, but
I can only eat ketchup if somebody already put it on. I would never put it on my like. It's actually a Pittsburgh story. Like the Heinz Corporation is in Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh area, and just the tour. I'm good.
Well,
no.
I have to say this though. If your fries are any good, I don't need anything on them, and I can eat them just by themselves because they're perfect.
That's facts. That's facts.
So if you see me dipping your fries, you need to check your fry recipe because they're not good.
Obee, I know that you've had controversial food takes like the fact that you like dots and snickerdoodles and apple pie and nonsense like that. But what is your most recent controversial food take? Something that few people know.
Oh man, that's a good one. I have to say, I mean, I feel like I've said so many. I'm trying to think of something I haven't said. I think I've said so many on the show. I would have to say that, man, that's a good question. I don't know. I gotta think. I would have to say that. Oh, I got one. Fruit Loops is the worst cereal ever. I can definitely say that.
Wait, what?
It's so bad. Yes. That's when I know I definitely haven't said. And this is crazy because that's something I grew up like really young, like Fruit Loops. And then one day, I think I was like a teenager. I had Fruit Loops, and it just like I ended up throwing the whole bowl away. And I was like, what the hell is this? I don't know. It's just like, you ever had that moment? It's just like when you're little and you're a kid and you love toys. And then that one moment comes when you look at the toys in your room and you just like stop playing with the toys. That's what it was for me for Fruit Loops. Like, what the hell is this? Why am I eating this?
Oh my god!
Oh, that cracked me up.
Mine is weird because of where I live and the fact that my kids can eat this like is going out of style. I can't stomach or stand eating cheese by itself. It makes me nauseous.
Wow.
My
Yeah, they're
daughter,
gonna kick you out of the state for that.
my daughter can sit there with like a little plate of like gorgonzola or provolone and just go to town. My son, same way. I look at that, I'm like, I feel like I'm about to heave. It literally just goes through me. Like the only way I can eat cheese by itself is in cheese curd form, and there's beer batter around it.
Uh,
And I try it every now and then. So you know what? I say to myself, all right, don't, try it, see if you like it. No, just the texture. I'm like, I need to throw it away. It's nauseating. It
I
is. Sorry, go ahead.
I admire your tenacity. Like you just keep trying, just in case. Maybe you were wrong before.
All right. I guess the last question is we're gonna go around. Let's start with you, Julie. What is huh, the best dessert that you've had this year?
Best dessert I've had this. Let me think. I ate a lot of dessert. And this is dessert that I didn't make, that somebody else gave me or I purchased. Correct? Because
Correct.
I like to make a lot of dessert, and I think I'm pretty good at it. So let me think. The best dessert I had. Wow. So there, and this might be cheating, but and this is at a place that's now just north of Cranberry. There is an ice cream shop, and the woman who owns it makes all of her ice cream from scratch by hand, and she makes a lemon blueberry ice cream. It is one of my favorite things in the entire universe. And it's one of, I've had a lot of great desserts this year. I've had some great cheesecakes, and I made some really good pies at Thanksgiving. And that else to get that ice cream. You can tell that she handpicks her ingredients. She's just really, really into making ice cream. And so that's probably the best thing I had this year, and it was surprising how good that place was. Because Pittsburgh, you can't throw a rock and not hit an ice cream stand, but that one is special. If you're listening, it's called the Ice Box. Such a cool venture that she's done, and I can't imagine how hard it is to get all that done and keep it afloat. So yeah, that was delicious.
Obee, what's the best dessert you've had this year?
so I'm gonna have to. I'm ready with my answer. I'm gonna have to go with it's a place in Dover, Delaware. So Dover is really really close to Maryland, and Dover is one of the I think two places on the entire East Coast that does sports betting. So it's frequented by a lot of people from Baltimore, D.C., Norfolk areas like that, Seven Cities areas, north of Dover, New York, etc. And it's a lot of people that go there, but not a lot of people talk about the food. Now, of course, Delaware State is across the street, literally from the casino, Delaware State University, but there's not much else to talk about in Dover, honestly. And it's this local um, literally mom and pop restaurant called Miss Carter's. Miss Carter herself still cooks. Miss Carter herself does not have a register that takes card. You have to pay cash. It's an old fashioned place, you know what I'm saying? And she's in there, and it's so traditional in that neighborhood that she got nervous because me and my friend weren't regulars. She didn't know us, and she didn't know if we were going to rob her or not. But the long story short was, this place is a fixture in that part of Dover, and Miss Carter was making the food fresh by herself. Like, we had chicken and collard greens and macaroni and cheese and cornbread. She made it fresh. With that being said, the desserts, let me tell you, and I'm a huge apple pie fan, but this is the best sweet potato pie I've ever had in my life. And she had this thing of ice cream, and I could tell it was made fresh. She scooped out 2 scoops of ice cream next to the pie, and this was the greatest ice cream and pie I've ever had in my life.
There's a place in Chicago called Sweet Mandy B's. A buddy of mine went out to Chicago just to kind of visit family and stuff, and he brought me back a Cookie Monster cupcake. Um, it's like a yellow cake that's baked over a chocolate chip cookie, and it's like a buttercream and chocolate chips. It is. I can't tell you that is not the best cupcake I've ever had in my entire life, and I've lived a lot of life. I mean, it was. I ate it so slowly that I wouldn't enjoy it. When it was gone, I felt regret because I knew it'd be a while before I'd see it again, and it was just tear-inducing. Like you're sitting there, like it was the greatest cupcake I've ever had, and it was so just perfect. It was perfect, and it was everything on what ain't a dessert, which is big, and it hit the spot, and it just cupcakes are one of those things that they go tremendously right or terribly wrong. This was tremendously right, and I just remember looking at myself like, and I'm looking at my hands like, I said before I ate it, do I take my time, which I did, and I just sat there and I ate it with my hands, and people, look at me like, nope, I don't really need a fork. I got this. I'm I'm gonna use my hands to hold this cupcake and savor it, and it was the best cupcake I've had in my entire life. These people need to make like a chain, like have a chain and actually put one here in Sheboygan. Julia, before we get out of here, can you tell people where they could interact with you on Twitter if they're not jerks and don't want to start fights?
What is my Twitter handle? Let me see. I never know it. I am on Twitter at OrangeJewels1975. I'm also on Instagram at something similar. I think it's that. And absolutely reach out. I mean, I do love to have good conversations. I like to listen. I like to learn new things. I like to teach new things. Um, and I think that's how conversations happen. And we can't put the onus of educating people just on marginalized communities. That's the last thing I want to say. Google is free. And, if people really want to learn about other people's experiences, start with reading and seeing what other people have to say about things that you live through and things that you experience too, and get their perspectives. I think that's the most important thing we can do in 2019.
I completely agree with that. Obee, where would people be able to find you on Twitter and talk about your book that you wrote and hopefully the sequel and what you got going on?
Yeah, so on Twitter you can find me at OBEE, the number 1NE, OB1. And the book is called Bounce Me Baby. It's about Washington, D.C.'s go-go music scene, why it's important to me, how it's shaped my life. And there's a sequel coming. I'm working on that now. The book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart.com, etc. in ebook and hard copy form.
You can find me at T Biggs as capital T, capital B, lowercase everything else. It's a mix of politics, pictures of my kids, food thoughts. We have the NFL draft coming up, and I got a quick little surprise. From the time I graduated from high school in 1992, oh, that just seems so long ago, 1992 until roughly 2008, I kept a journal. I've kept a journal since then, but I've kept a journal for those specific time period, and I've been going through it and look for my book possibly mid 2021. It is a travel log. It is kind of not so much a memoir because it's part funny, it's part sad, but it's an honest account of the things I've done and the places I've seen and just life through my eyes. And it's not always like I don't look like the hero in any of this. I'm just a regular dude, but it's it's a lot of pages to go through, and it'll probably spend the rest of the balance of next year trying to edit it because it is a lot of work. I apparently wrote a lot, and I had a lot to say. The 90s were a hell of a time. But I want to.
Oh, they really were.
There are stories. Julia, thank you so much for joining us. The door is always open. You ever want to come back, please come. You are more than welcome to entertain, inform, and educate us.
Well, and next time we got to talk a little bit more about sports because I think we have a mutual hatred
Do we?
of the Duke Blue Devils. Yeah.
Oh, Lord, yes.
Yeah.
They, honestly, as a school, a crew, I just can't. All of them, just from Bobby Hurley to Christian Laettner to Zion Williamson, all of them go straight to hell. Don't care. Fight.
But you know what? No, I'm saving Grant Hill. I'm going to save Grant Hill. Keep one.
I am a Carolina guy, and that's one school that honestly, like, they can just go. No, they.
Nope.
But I want to thank you both for joining us
Well,
tonight.
thanks so much.
The door is always open. Please come. Like, we want to have you back whenever whenever you can make time or something like a gap in the schedule. Please, the door is open.
Absolutely. Thanks again so much for having me. It was great chatting with you guys tonight, and hopefully next time I'll be a little bit more awake and my voice will sound a little bit less grovelly.
That's okay. It's been another episode of the Black Tuesday podcast. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Good night.